Deborah. Thanks, ladies, for coming out. Appreciate it very much. Looking forward to talking to you all about notes and the note space and what are notes and how to acquire them and all those fun things. A little preface to me. I was very fortunate to be one of the 12 members that was originally at that brunch when Deborah started Ren. And I am a very proud founding member of this organization. I encourage you strongly to join Ren in whatever area that you're in, because honestly, I wish that starting my real estate career that I had the support system that you ladies have right now. Because when I started 20 years ago, I didn't. I didn't have the support. And I was thrown into, people will ask me, well, how did you start in real estate? I was literally thrown into real estate by virtue of inheritance. I had a family member pass away. We had pieces of property out of state that I had to now go and handle. So I started my real estate career as a property manager. I very quickly realized I was not good at that at all. Please don't self-manage. Unless you're extremely good at it and you already have a history. Because I have a very, very big heart, and everybody's got a story, and that's something that you need to also realize, that you can be a big heart, but also be a professional business person, okay? So keep that in mind. So that being said, 20 years ago, started in real estate and didn't know anything at all about real estate and real estate investing specifically. I very quickly learned. I ended up taking those units that we had that were rentals, selling them off, and then developing a small piece of property. And then that turned into developing bigger pieces of property. And then that turned into owning my own construction company. And we grew to having about 36 employees in a very short period of time. We were doing very well. And then, we progressed even further and started doing even better. 2005, as everybody knows, was a huge boom. 2006, same thing. But the problem was that if anybody had a pulse, they gave you a loan. And there were people that couldn't sustain it, right? So there were a lot of foreclosures that happened in 2007. Lending froze up. And believe me when I tell you, when the pebble hits into the pond, it fingers out the concentric circles that move out and the rings that move out and the ripple effect, and it got me too. I was very, very fortunate because I had a lot of assets and I had some liquidity. So I was able to work my way through that huge downturn in the real estate market. It wasn't a downturn, it was a crash, and everybody knows it. So I was able to, after 3 years, really work my way into paying everybody off, building up, and 3 years later, I walked away literally with nothing. I lost a huge amount of money, and I looked at that and I said, okay, I've really skinned my knees here, right? I've really skinned my knees. But I have hands, I have a mouth, and I have a brain. So I surrounded myself a little bit later. I went away, of course, from real estate for a little while, understandably. And then when I came back in, I really surrounded myself with people that were in the know. But the interesting thing that happened, and I'm going to challenge all of you, because if you're new or if you're looking for a different direction in your real estate career, where you go really is dictated by what you want, right? So Deborah talks about a lot of real estate investors will ask you what your why is. I ask you what your what is. Meaning, do you want to be in one central location? Do you want to have freedom and flexibility to go out of state? Do you want to be in Italy and be able to do real estate transactions anywhere in the world and not be tied to one location? That was big for me. I want freedom. I can do this business anywhere in the world. Anywhere where I have a computer and a phone. That's how I can do this business. I'm not tied to one location. I'm not tied to a time zone. There's a huge amount of flexibility. And for me, having had my construction company, that was a big thing because I was tied to my construction company. I had to be in that location, right? So when I came back into real estate investing, I started looking for my what instead of my why. I wanted flexibility. I wanted chunks of money and I wanted streams of money. So I wanted the best of both worlds, meaning fix and flip or passive income, buy and hold. I wanted it all. And you know what? That's okay. It's okay to want it all. Just know that, right? So for me, again, I tried a lot of different things. I've done just about everything there is to do in real estate and real estate investing. I explained before, I've been in construction. The one thing I haven't done is I have not become a realtor. Because that was more for the retail side in my mind versus the investor side. I've done tax liens, I've done tax deeds, I've done buy and hold, I've done fix and flip, I've done ground up construction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I found notes. And I'm telling you, angels sang for me. For me. It's not for everybody, okay? But I looked around when I discovered notes and I said, there's a reason that banks are banks. There's a reason for that. What is that reason? So I started studying, okay? Notes is not the type of investing that you can fit in a box. It's fluid. There's a lot of flexibility. We have a lot of different exit strategies, and I'll get to those in a few minutes. But you know, when you deal with fix and flip properties and buy and hold properties, pretty much you do your analysis. If it fits in the box, boom, you do the deal. Notes, there's different variables that you have to know about, and I'll get to that in a moment as well. So for me, I found that flexibility and that freedom to be very intriguing. So I started studying. Please study. No matter what you do, please educate yourself because you're dealing with money, but you're also dealing with people. And so you have to have a nice balance between the two, right? Okay. So what is a note? I get that question all the time. What is a note? Most people don't realize that they actually sign notes every single day. Most people don't realize that. A note is basically a debt instrument, okay? It basically is a promise to pay. So when you sign that credit card slip, how many of us use credit cards? Right? So when it used to be a slip, now it's the pad. But when you sign for that charge, you're signing a note. Did you know that? You're promising to pay the bank the money that it has fronted for you. That's what a note is, okay? So there's that, a credit card is an unsecured note. It's not secured by anything. There are secured notes. If you buy a house, you're gonna sign a promissory note to the bank that you're gonna pay the monthly mortgage on time, every time, so until you pay your house off, right? Well, sometimes life happens to people. So for me, note investing, I invest in first position, non-performing notes secured by real estate, okay? So there are notes out there for people that buy cars. When you finance a car, you're signing a note. It's collateralized by the car. So if you don't pay that car payment off, or that car payment every month, they're gonna come take your car, right? Same thing with notes in real estate. So if you don't pay your mortgage payment, the bank is gonna come take your house. Now, as I said, I invest in first position. There's a reason for that. I want to be in control of my destiny. I've been through 2007. I don't want to lose money on purpose, right? So I would rather be the first position that if a foreclosure occurs, it's in my control. In a second position, understand you're behind the first. You're behind the bank that's in the first position that has the senior lien. And you can, and probably will, at some point, lose your money to a foreclosing first. So for me, I didn't want that. There are plenty of people that do phenomenally well in second trustee investing. Great. It's just not for me. So identify your what. Identify who you are as an investor. Is that acceptable to you? Are you in a position where you can take that risk? Okay? For me, no. I also buy non-performing. Now that sounds risky, right? It's not performing. Why do I do that? I buy non-performing notes for a couple different reasons. Number one, I'm not regulated like an institutional bank, so I have a little more flexibility in terms of my being able to work with the borrower. That's number one. Number two, when you buy a non-performing note, we buy them at a very deep discount. So for instance, oftentimes life has happened to this borrower, or they bought in 2005 or 2006, or even a little bit later, and they modified their loan and now they're back underwater. So, and the market has corrected, right? So in 2005 and in 2006, the height of the market, it was high back then, right? So the house at this point, when they bought it, was worth $150,000, and now it's only worth $80,000. They've got a mortgage for $150,000, and the house is only worth $80,000, so they can't sell it. What happens if life happened to them? They got a divorce, or they had a medical emergency, or death in the family. I mean, life happens every day to all of us. It doesn't mean that they're bad people, it just means that bad things have happened to them, and they can no longer afford their mortgage. So what I can do is I can come in, and the banks are heavily regulated, so what happens is when I go to my banks or my asset managers, I'm actually buying that non-performing note at a very deep discount. Generally, it's anywhere between 46 and 62% of the current market value of the property. That's very important. I do not buy based on the unpaid principal balance. So in other words, the note that's worth $150,000, because that's what they promised to pay the bank, right? The house is now only worth $80,000. I'm going to buy it, and for easy numbers, let's use 50% right now. I'm going to buy it at 50% of the $80,000. So I buy it for $40,000, right? They owe me $150,000. Would you say that there's a whole lot of working room there? Can I work with the borrower even between $40,000 and $80,000? There's a lot of working room there, right? So I build in equity. Equity is a great thing to have. Why? If the market fluctuates, right? We're still covered. I've still got a huge amount of equity. So even if the market crashes, which historically it has not done 50% in 6 months' time, we see it coming generally. But if the market crashes and we lose 50% of our equity, am I still pretty covered? Yeah. So that's why I buy non-performing notes, okay? In so doing, again, we're able to really work with the borrower. As I just explained, we've built in a $40,000 cushion on current market value. So we really have the ability, if the borrower is qualified, to work with that borrower to actually stay in their homes. It's very gratifying for me as an investor to help people that have been beat up by the big banks and keep them and their families in their home and make a profit doing it. That is very gratifying for me. Very, very gratifying for me. So again, there are performing notes that are out there in terms of real estate. You can buy them if you just want cash flow. You're not going to get nearly as big a discount. As an investor, how do I make money buying non-performing notes? I'm sorry, Jen. Oh. Sorry, I saw you signaling. As an investor, how do I make money buying non-performing notes? So, buying a non-performing note, again, I build in a lot of equity. I am able to have 4 different strategies in terms of exit that we generally use. In note investing, remember I said it's fluid and there's a lot of flexibility. There's actually about 23 different exit strategies that we have at our avail as a note investor, all right? We generally only use 4. The 4 that we use are getting them to reperform, a short sale, a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and I'll explain these in a moment if you don't know what they are, and the foreclosure, all right? So foreclosure is pretty standard. Everybody knows what that is. A deed in lieu of foreclosure is when the borrower says to us and works with us and our loss mitigation team, I can't stay, I can't afford it, but I don't want a foreclosure on my credit. I'm willing to sign my deed, my interest in this property, over to you, Paige, as payment in full for the note that I owe you. Is that acceptable? And generally, we will say yes, okay? There are some other factors that we have to look into. That's due diligence, and we'll talk about that in a moment. All right, so deed in lieu of foreclosure. A reperformer is the situation that we talked is our best situation. We actually get to help the borrower stay in their property and make a profit doing it. And I will explain that in a moment as well. The short sale, everybody's kind of known about the short sales. So for the same thing, the face value of the note is $150,000. The current market value of the property is only $80,000. The borrower comes to us and says, I have a buyer for $80,000 because that's all the property is worth. Is that okay? What would you say? Yes. How long did it take you to make that decision? Right? So, the big banks, and you've heard horror stories about short sales, and the banks taking 9, 10, 12, 14, 18 months to make a decision. I am not regulated that way. I can make a decision that fast. So, generally, I am able to generate, now, in a reperformance situation, we generate chunks of cash and streams of cash. In a reperformance situation, we work hand in hand with the borrower. We ask them to have a little skin in the game, right? Because they have been delinquent for a period of sometimes many years. So we ask them to pay a little skin in the game fee, a reinstatement fee. Now that does not hit against, it'll go towards the arrearage. It will not hit against your principal. It'll go towards the arrearage. Then we work with them, and now we have to incentivize the borrower because, again, remember, they're underwater and they've been beat up. So how do we incentivize a borrower? We will tell them if you make your payments on time every time for the first 4 to 6 months, we're going to take half of your arrearage and forgive it. Pretty big incentive, don't you think? There's $70,000 on the line here, right? So the second half is if you pay the next 4 to 6 months on time every time, which is month 6 to 12, then we'll wipe out the other half. Do you think they'd be intrigued to perform and pay on time? Yes. What have they done? What have we done? We've developed a reinstatement fee, so there's a chunk of cash. We've now cash flowed for 12 months, so there's streams of cash. Now, at the end of 12 months, we have an option, right? We can either continue to cash flow it, or we can help the borrower to restabilize their credit by refinancing them out. There are some government programs that are out there that work very well. They will actually refi, because we've now called what's called seasoning the note. We've seasoned the note. They've had a progression of payments on time every time. They've restabilized their credit. The government comes in and will refi us out at 97.5%. Another big chunk of money. Who likes that deal? If you don't raise your hand, you're crazy. Exactly. Both hands go up. You may, sure.
So I guess I'm somewhere in the two places where you said that you would get slashed the arrears into half. So in the $150,000 situation,
Yes.
what does that really mean? Because now your value is $80,000. So how do you slash that?
Again, we're not really regulated as like an institutional bank would. So I can actually slash $70,000 off the debt that is owed to me. So what happens is we do it's a version of a modification, of a loan modification. I, by the way, don't do permanent loan modifications until I've seasoned a note, meaning that I will put in place a trial payment plan or a forbearance agreement. And the borrower, so we are not waiving our rights as the bank to foreclose on our borrower if they don't perform as agreed, right? So, but at the end of the 12 months, that forbearance agreement, so the forbearance agreement will say, I am willing to modify your loan at the end of 12 months down from $150,000 down to the $80,000 if this sequence of events happens. And once that sequence of events happens, then it turns into a permanent modification. Make sense? Okay. All right. So as I mentioned before, due diligence is the next factor that we really need to consider. you know what? Let me back up a little bit. I'm sorry. Let's go back to the four exit strategies. So we just talked about reperformance. We've talked about the deed in lieu of foreclosure. Short sale is pretty easy. Everybody knows about that. Foreclosures. There are two different types of foreclosures that we do. It's always an auction. That's law. There always has to be an auction that is conducted. Foreclosure can be handled in a judicial foreclosure state by a judge and the court, and then the auction is conducted by a sheriff. So there are judicial foreclosure states, and then there's non-judicial foreclosure states. Non-judicial foreclosure states are conducted by a trustee for a beneficiary. I, as the bank, am the beneficiary, okay? Trustee states, non-judicial foreclosure states, generally will take about 3 to 6 months, depending upon the state. There are some that have express lanes. Texas and Alabama are two of them. Virginia is another one. But they can get a foreclosure done quickly. Then there are states that are judicial foreclosure states, and it takes anywhere from 8 to 12 months in most states. And then there's states like New York and New Jersey that take a minimum of 24 months plus. So again, knowing what to look for in your note investing is very important. For me, I don't want to wait 24 months to just get my money out. I want to rotate my money and put it back into the market, right? So I don't invest in notes in New York and New Jersey for that very reason, okay? But that's me as an investor. That's why I challenge you to understand what your what is and then mold your investing sphere around your what, because that's going to dictate how you get there, okay? So, again, most of my investing, I like to go into notes thinking that I'm only going to be in for about 12 months. That's generally my maximum, my time frame, and I adjust accordingly in terms of states and areas of the country that I do that. But we do buy notes across the country, and we have had a lot of success with them. Okay, due diligence. In this space, due diligence it's paramount. It is absolutely paramount. You have to know the questions to ask. And I'm going to say this, ladies, that you can go right now online and buy a note. I do not suggest you do that because you don't know the questions to ask. You don't know the questions to ask. Due diligence is absolutely critical, and I cannot stress this enough, in note investing. It's critical. You need to know, because that's how you mitigate your risk. If you do your due diligence well, you can mitigate your risk. And that's another big plus for me in note investing. I'm in control of my outcome for the most part. We do have a factor in the borrower. We have to figure out what the borrower is going to do. But for the most part, I can mitigate my risk and not rely on anybody else for the outcome. I'm in control. And after having gone through 2007 to 2009, that was a big factor for me. Some people don't care. I do. So, how do you do due diligence? Is there such a thing as bad notes? I like to say no. There is not such a thing as a bad note. There is such a thing as doing or buying notes badly. If you don't do your due diligence, you will buy a note badly and you will get hurt. So I strongly urge you, if this is a space that you want to get into, educate yourself. Start listening to podcasts. Start reading. There's educational material out there. Joint venture with people. Start talking to people. Go to REI subgroups for note investing. Ask questions. Lots and lots and lots and lots of questions. And that way you will actually get your footing under you, and you'll be able to mitigate your risk by acquainting yourself with even REN members. Right? Again, go back to REN. You have a support system here that you don't have, that I didn't have. You're really lucky. So use it, and use all of us that come and speak at the meetings, to bounce things off of. That's why we're here. That's why Deborah started REN. So Anyway, sorry, I digress. Sidetrack, tangent. Okay, so again, with due diligence, just some things to look at in terms of due diligence, because there's a whole litany of things, but you want to make sure that there are no property taxes that are due. You have to know what kind of property taxes are due on the property that is collateralizing your note, right? Again, first position, we're banking on the collateral. We analyze the collateral, which is the house. So we do all of our due diligence, current fair market value on the house. If it's what types of county populations. I personally do not buy in populations that are less than 50,000 people. Why? I need to sell it. If I end up with the property and I can't get my borrower to reperform, I need to be able to sell it. And so I have found through experience that we need to have a certain county population, and that's my threshold. We also have to have a certain threshold, develop whatever your threshold is for the value of the property. Some people want higher value properties, some people want lower value properties, and some people are in the middle. I tend to be in the middle and to the lower. The reason I do that is because, again, mitigate my risk. I can take $250,000 or $300,000 that you would buy one note, maybe, in California, and I can go out of state and buy 5, 6, 7, 8 notes. I'm putting my money in different baskets, in different geographic locations, and if one ends up in a foreclosure, another one might end up as a reperformance, right? So I like to diversify and mitigate my risk. That's for me. We talked about county population. We talked about current market value. Sewer liens, those are another one. We want to check title. That's a big one. There's such a thing as an O&E report. It's called an ownership and encumbrance report. We want to check that. We want to make sure that we have all of our assignments. So there's a chain that goes from bank to bank to bank to bank to bank. And if you've ever bought a house and have a mortgage, has anybody ever bought a house and gotten a letter that your lender has changed and your service company has changed? What has happened? The note has been transferred. The note has been sold to somebody else, okay? That's exactly what happens. We need to make sure that that chain of ownership, though, is perfected. We need to make sure that it goes from bank A to bank B to bank C, and that it's called an assignment of mortgage or deed of trust, and an allonge. A note is not recorded in the county recorder's office. The allonge is what transfers that note in terms of ownership. A deed of trust or a mortgage is recorded in the county recorder's office. So the transfer of ownership of that is the assignment of mortgage or deed of trust. So we need to make sure that all of those are in line, okay? We need to make sure that there's be aware of any junior liens, any liens behind us. If there's going to be a tax sale, if there has been a tax sale, why is that important? Well, if there's been a tax sale, you no longer are in first position. You have to know that you are going to redeem that tax to get your property back, your first position back. So as long as you do your due diligence well and you know about these different factors that are involved, you can mitigate your risk and have that knowledge and control your destiny, okay? Due diligence is paramount in this space, because you don't want an oops. And if you have an oops, just pray it's a couple $100, okay? To that end, much like fixing and flipping properties, I am fixing and flipping paper. So when you fix and flip properties, you have the house, and then you have your rehab budget. In note investing, we have the debt, or the note, and we have a rehab budget. So always factor into your purchase price of the note that you're going to have to pay certain fees to process that note to an exit, to an outcome, right? Generally, that is anywhere between $5,000 and $6,000 per 12 months, not including any delinquent taxes, okay? So that's a standard. Make sure that you have those, that that you have those factored into your purchase price because it does dictate your outcome. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, deals. Deals, 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 deals. How do I find these notes, Paige? Great question. Yes? Sure.
You were just saying about the delinquent taxes.
Yes.
So you were saying up front that part of the due diligence is to make sure that there aren't property taxes owed, right?
Correct.
So how would you end up with delinquent taxes?
Great question, Elizabeth. Thank you for asking that. So how do we end up with property taxes if we make sure that there aren't any forthcoming or that are due? What we do is oftentimes you can go online and check the county tax collector's website to see if, in fact, there are any delinquent taxes. Now, I take it a step further. Here's why. The website shows 0 taxes due. I will pick up the phone and actually call the county to verify that no taxes are due and that no tax sale has occurred. Because if you go online and see 0 taxes are due, and you don't call that the reason that there's no taxes due is because the county already sold them to a third party, how are you going to know? There are a lot of note investors that don't do that. I always, always call the county. So, I will call the county and I will say that I'm checking for, it's very simple, and it's public record, by the way, so they're not going to not tell you. They might try to charge you a fee. Some counties do that, but it is public record. I will call them and I will say, I am looking at a property in your county and I'd like to know if there are any delinquent taxes. If they say, nope, there's no balance due, my next question is, has there been a tax sale? And if they say no, the borrower is current, okay, great. Yes, when did that tax sale occur, please? And would you send me over to your redemption department so I can find out how much is owed to redeem the taxes? If this is a note against a property that I really, really want, I will find out, and if the numbers still make sense by paying that redemption, at least we have the knowledge, right? Due diligence, due diligence, due diligence, due diligence. So just because taxes are owed doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. We just have to know about it so we don't have a, what do you mean there's $5,000 due in delinquent property taxes? Huh? So always, always, always call because the website will show 0, but if there's been a tax sale, now you're on the hook of, or potentially going to lose your lien because a municipal lien, water, sewer, power, anything that's governed by the city, municipal liens or property taxes will supersede your first lien. It's the only thing that will go in front of you, okay? So be sure you do your due diligence in terms of your note investing in that regard. Yes, be sure that you call and make sure that there are no taxes. Municipal liens, water, sewer, power that's run not by an independent power company but by the city or county, and property taxes are the only thing that will supersede your lien position, okay? There are some HOA super lien states. Florida is one of them. Don't be afraid of that. That's a whole other topic that we can discuss in its own entirety. Be aware of it, that you want to check in homeowner status. That's another thing. I don't typically buy notes that are on mobile homes or in condo situations. They're harder to sell. Other questions on some due diligence? No? Okay. We were going to deals, 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 how to find deals. Okay, like anything in real estate investing, it is all relationship-based. All of it. How you find the deal is who you know. Your net worth is your network. Nothing is more true than that in all real estate investing, including notes. So the interesting thing about notes is it's a very small space. Reputation in this business in particular is very important. So if you say you're going to do something with an asset manager, please do it. You will only hurt yourself if you don't. If you say you're going to buy a note to an asset manager, please buy the note. And if you don't, please have a very good reason that there's something wrong with the file, okay? Asset managers are very busy. They literally deal in hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars plus. They don't like their time being wasted. So be sure that you are going to do what you say you do. That being said, we find our deals through hedge funds, banks. Now granted, I'm not at a level, I wish I was, that I can't walk into Chase tomorrow and say, give me your tape, that's what it's called, a tape, which is basically an Excel spreadsheet, a list of the assets. Give me your tape because I want to buy some non-performing notes from you. They will laugh me out of the building. Actually, if somebody even really knows what that is in a branch, I would be surprised. So, we focus on smaller regional banks, okay? I generally don't buy notes in California because, again, they're more expensive. I'd rather mitigate my risk by putting that money toward many different baskets out of state. So, smaller regional banks. We go to the credit unions. Credit unions are a great place to go for note deals. We also deal with other note investors. Find them at your REI, believe it or not. There's meetup groups online for note investing. Start talking to people. You never know who you're sitting next to. Hard money lenders. That's another one. Do they ever have notes that have stopped performing? Bankruptcy attorneys, another big one. So really, it's just a matter of your network. Start networking, start thinking out of the box, start talking to people. This is what you want to be doing. And you would be surprised what doors open up. When you get to a place where you either joint venture with somebody or you go you've educated yourself and now you think you're ready to buy a note, maybe with some mentorship or whatever, you can go online and buy a note. And believe it or not, that's how you get your foot in the door sometimes. Sometimes you call up that asset manager that's brokering, brokers, that's another one, that's brokering that note and say, hey, I'm ready for, more than one or two. Can you introduce me to somebody else? And they do. It's amazing. But you have to ask. You have to network. You have to. Now, as in most real estate transactions, there's two things that people look for: the deal and money. Capital, right? All of our capital at some point that we can invest caps out. Sad to say. Even me. Yes. So my own money is in the note space, but I also work with joint venture partners. I also work with people that loan money to me that want to get a better rate of return. Those are great ways to start finding funds for your deals because unlike fix and flip, you cannot finance notes unless it's through a private party, okay? So you can't go into a bank and say, I want to buy $1 million worth of notes and I want you to finance it for me. Even hard money lenders would say, nope. It's cash and carry. So all of our people that we buy from, and I collectively call them asset managers, all of our asset managers are cash. You have to have cash in full to buy the note. But again, remember, we're buying at a very deep discount, okay? So look for those funding sources. Look for your private money lenders, your partners. Talk to everybody you know. You'd be surprised. And everybody gets very nervous about this. Talking about money, it's like taboo. Ooh. Don't be. Because honestly, what can somebody earn in a savings account right now? That's right. Zero, it's 1% per year. Do you think, at best case scenario, do you think people are happy with that kind of return? No. You have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to help somebody earn a better rate of return. So start talking to people. Don't be afraid. You're not asking for money. Talk about what you do. Somebody might just say, I'd be interested in doing something like that. So I encourage you, and that's even for new real estate investors, that's the hardest thing to do, is say what you're doing and talk about the money part of it, right? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, because you have the opportunity. Yes, Shilpa.
If I get an average deal, I would say average, right? I'm not saying great deal, it's a great deal. What's the rate of return you look for?
Ha-ha. Everybody asked me that question. Okay, so the question is, what is the average rate of return? That's a tough one to answer. I'm going to say to you, it depends. There are a variety of different factors. If you purchase the note well, meaning you've done your due diligence, you know the current market value of that property that's collateralizing the loan, you can negotiate with the bank, but you have to do so for not just because I want to pay a lower price. You have to go to them with certain factors. Well, Mr. Bank, this property needs rehab. It's not in perfect condition. 99.9% of the notes that we buy have properties attached to them that are not in perfect condition, right? So you have to develop your list of why you want to pay a lower price. Now, average return, and I hate to say this, let's say it's in the double digits is average. Average return is in the double digits, sometimes more. And I'll give you a couple of examples if we have time of how the notes will end up where you hit home runs. I generally will be able to hit home runs about, and this is a bold statement, I'm going to make it, and I'm going to make it live. Once a quarter, I hit a home run. Not too bad. And when I say a home run, that means I double my money. It's pretty good. That's a home run. That's a home run. That's a home run. So, okay, so for me, also, I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked about generating chunks and streams, and in so doing, there's fix and flip, and then there's buy and hold. So for me, why do I want to be the bank as opposed to a landlord? Any ideas? Don't have to maintain the property. Anything else? Taxes. Is it my responsibility as the bank to pay the taxes? No. If the air conditioning breaks, who is my borrower going to call? Are they going to call me? No. Right, exactly. So I don't have to worry about that. Here's another question. What is the risk? Liability. It's a great question. What is the risk? When I buy a note, regardless of whether I know a borrower is in the property or not, because oftentimes borrowers have impound accounts, meaning that part of their mortgage payment goes to the property taxes and the insurance. Well, what happens if they're not paying? It's likely that they have not been paid. So when I buy a note, and I am talking the very day that the funds get transferred, the next phone call I make is to my insurance company. And I do what's called force placing the insurance. So I put insurance on that property immediately, even if there's a borrower. Now, if there's a borrower and we can prove that the insurance has been in place, we will contact the insurance company and cancel the insurance. But understand that that insurance is in place because that house is what's collateralizing and protecting our investment. That is number one priority. Make sure you cover your investment. To that end also, very, very quickly, when we're looking at a note, make sure that you have boots on the ground that drives physically by the property. I don't care if it's a family member, a neighbor, a realtor. Believe it or not, we do involve realtors that are generous and donate their time, and they will go out to a property, take pictures, even sometimes talk to neighbors. It depends on the realtor. And what we do is when we contact them, when we make sure that we tell them what we're doing. We don't lie, ever. Please, do not lie. Tell them you're a note investor, you're looking at this note to buy this note, this property is collateralizing your note. If we end up with the property as REO, meaning through deed in lieu or foreclosure, We will then contact that realtor that helped us out by going by and taking pictures and talk to them about listing that property for sale. You know, always respect their time, okay? So again, make sure that the property, that they get pictures of the property. Why? Anybody? You want to make sure it's there. Exactly, because what happened, I mean, does lightning happen? Does fire happen? What about tornadoes? Do those ever happen? Okay, so make sure that the property is there because that's your collateral. That's what's protecting your investment. So always, always, always eyes on that particular property. Okay. Now, back to being a note investor and being the bank versus being own a buy and hold property, a landlord. Now, granted, there is a slight difference. We do cash flow. We don't have a whole lot of liability. We don't have a whole lot in terms of what we need to maintain and repair. There is some maintenance that we still do through third-party servicing companies, so keep that in mind. However, a note is not a depreciating asset. So consider that when you're talking about your note investing. It is a good idea, in my opinion, to diversify some. Okay, because it isn't, we're buying debt, we're not buying a hard asset. It's collateralized by a hard asset, but we're buying debt, okay? So check with your tax people. There are a lot of people out there too that will ask the question, well, I have a self-directed IRA, can I use that for note investing? And my answer is, yes, it is allowed, however, you need to check with your custodian, because different self-directed IRAs are set up a different way. I am not a tax professional. I don't profess to be one. And I am not a financial advisor in terms of your self-directed IRA. So please be sure that you talk with them first, but it can be done. Same thing with solo Ks, okay? Let's see, what else? I also get the question again, and I think I touched on it before, what is the most rewarding thing in being a note investor? The response from Peggy was that you get paid. Yes, you get paid. I have been through life, and life has happened to me, and it's taken me down to my knees. I have been very fortunate that I have come back. So for me, to be able to help a qualified family stay in their house is priceless. It's priceless. These people have been beat up for years. Now, granted, understand there are people out there, sad to say, that do milk the system. They take advantage. You know, they file bankruptcy 3-4 times. They modify their loans 3-4 times, and it gets transferred bank to bank to bank, and the banks don't pay attention until it arrives at Paige's desk. Well, Paige pays attention. So I'm going to know even before I buy that note via the files that we get ahead of time if you're a serial BK filer or a serial loan modifier. And I'm probably not going to offer you that option. Right? I'm going to protect my money. I'm going to protect my investors' money. So I'm not going to offer that option, but I will offer you the option of a deed in lieu of foreclosure, so that way you don't have a foreclosure on your record. It's important. But people, everybody, I've been very, very fortunate to help borrowers, and they have sent letters to our loss mitigation people and thanked me. Just heart-wrenching letters that nobody listened to them for 3 years. And now they get to keep their kids in the same school with their friends in the same house. That for me, and I made a profit helping somebody like that, that's priceless to me. So again, I really, really encourage you, develop your what. That's gonna guide where you go in your investing career, whether that's notes, buy and hold, you know, multifamily, fix and flip, wholesaling, any tax deeds, tax lien, any of that stuff, that's going to dictate what you need, is going to dictate where you invest your money and where you spend your time. Because in real estate, there's lots of shiny objects everywhere. There's lots of them. Pick one or two. If you're new, pick one or two. focus in and say, okay, let's see if maybe this is the avenue I'm supposed to be in. And if it is, great, stay there. Educate yourself more. If it's not, okay, you learned that's not for you. Go on to the next thing. So I think I touched on anything. Does anybody else have any questions? Peggy.
So after you buy a note, you determine that this is the note you want, which is a non-conforming note.
Yes.
How long does it, and I know everyone's different.
Yeah.
How long does it take to get that note performing? Does it take a lot of phone calls? So you're bringing an investor in with you.
Sure.
I'm sure that's one of the questions that they will ask. How long do you think it is before this note will perform?
Great question. Okay, so the question is, how long does it take to get a non-performing note re-performing? And I'm glad you actually touched on that because there are a couple different responses. Number one, in a re-performance situation, we always anticipate that it's going to take probably at least 3.5 months to even get in contact with the borrower. And the reason is, these people have been beat up. They get the phone calls. So, you know, most of them, but you'd be surprised, some of them pick up immediately. Most of them are not going to pick up on your first phone call. So it does take some time in terms of outreach. That being said, the re-performance generally will take anywhere, once we talk to the borrower, about 8 to 12 months. Same thing in a judicial foreclosure state. So we anticipate always a 12-month exit strategy. Always, always, always. Sometimes it happens faster. Now, a deed in lieu can happen as quickly as you can put together the phone conversation and put together the paperwork, all right? A short sale, same thing. So short sales, deed in lieu, they might take anywhere between 2 to 5 months or less. Non-judicial foreclosure states are anywhere between 3 and 6 months. Judicial foreclosure states anywhere between 8 and 12 months. Re-performers anywhere between 8 and 12 months. Does that answer? Absolutely.
And what you want is re-performers.
I'm sorry?
And what you really want are re-performers.
My goal setting out is always, first and foremost, to get them to re-perform. Always, without fail. Does that always happen? No. No. As a matter of fact, it's very interesting to me because statistically, out of every 10 notes that we buy, a third will end up in a re-performing situation, a third will end up in a short sale or a deed in lieu situation, and a third will end up in foreclosure. Always. I don't know, it's very funny because we've tracked it, and sure enough, a third. So, yes?
Let's say that you go deal with the buyer, and how much is he going to pay? The same amount he was paying to the prior bank?
So if we get in contact with the borrower, you're asking how much are they on the hook for with us as the new bank? Okay, great question, Sophia, thank you. It's really up to you, okay? You know how much you've invested in that, buying that note. You also anticipate that there's going to be $5,000 to $6,000 in workout costs, right, for that year. So you base it on the current market value of the house, what you paid for it, and what you're seeking as a profit, right? So for me, in the $150,000 to the $80,000 situation, and if I only paid $40,000 and I've got $5,000 into it in workout expenses, that's still almost a home run, right? We're almost doubling our money at $80,000. Do you think that that would help the borrower in that situation? Of course. Of course. And we make a heck of a profit doing it. So you really kind of dictate the terms. Again, there's a lot of flexibility. You cannot demand more than you are owed. So whatever the face value of that note is, plus recoverable, they're called recoverable expenses. So if you paid an attorney to foreclose or you paid the property taxes, all of those fun things, you know, get added, interest arrearage, late fees, all those things get added to the face value of that note. You're legally entitled to whatever that amount is, but you cannot charge more. So if the property value is more than that, then they could just sell the house, pay you off, and you're done, which is also why I focus on non-performing that are underwater. Yep.
How long does it take you to do the due diligence normally?
Great question. Due diligence. So due diligence, we do incorporate some realtors. So due diligence, so the banks will guide you as to how long you have. Generally, you can get a good due diligence done if you push it 3 to 5 days. And the banks are aware of that. If you're looking at more than one asset, it's going to take you longer, and they know that. The asset managers are willing to work with you on that. Julie.
Like several things, but are you focusing on just a couple of different places where you have people on the ground and teams on the ground, or can you do it everywhere? It's part one and part two. The loss mitigation team, is that centralized in the company that you hire?
Yes. Great question. Okay, the other factor in real estate investing is not only who you know, it's your teams. Definitely develop teams. In terms of the realtors, we actually don't try to monopolize or use a realtor too many times because, again, if we don't end up buying the note, we don't want to abuse the privilege. We don't want to abuse their time. So if a realtor tells us, any notes that you have in this area, please call me. I'm happy to help you. Great, we'll call them. If not, we will look up realtors that are in close proximity to where the collateral is. You don't want to call a realtor that is 20 miles away from the note, right? You want to call a realtor that's a mile or two, that their office is a mile or two from that note. And just be aware, that you don't want, they're happy to help. Generally, 75 to 85% of the realtors that we contact will go out and take the time and take pictures and do it for free. Our other part of our team is loss mitigation and servicing. By the way, we don't ever, I don't ever, have direct contact with our borrower. They always go through our teams. Our loss mitigation, they handle those that are non-performing, so our loss mitigation team has direct contact. These are licensed debt collecting companies. Do not self-service your notes. Employ the team to do it. They keep immaculate records. They have contact with the borrowers. They know what they can and cannot say. So make sure that you hire them. My team is nationwide. There are some that are not, so make sure that whoever you use is licensed in the state in which you buy the note. Okay? That's really important. One more question. Yes, Rose.
My biggest question is how you find these non-conforming notes. And you say you contact banks or credit unions. Is it possible to contact buyers directly by taking out ads or bandit sites like a lot of people do?
That will give you, the borrower is not going to know where to guide you to buy the note. And they're not going to understand why you're contacting them. They're in foreclosure, right, to buy their note. They're going to be like, what are you trying to do? You're trying to steal my house. That's their immediate thought. They're not exactly sure, and they probably won't divulge that to you. You could probably try. I don't. My biggest asset is my time. All of your biggest asset should be your time.
How difficult is it to get a lender to give up a list like that of non-conforming notes?
If you are qualified, they will require that you sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. So you can't distribute that list to everybody, right? And they will very likely send you a smaller tape to start, and then as you perform, improve yourself, and develop your reputation, then they'll start sending you bigger tapes and so on. But it's all in relation. Please.
So as you're networking, because we just talked about networking teams, if you're interested in notes, you can start asking around. I'll just give an example. The first note that I got into was somebody else's property. They had a property and they needed a loan against it. They owned it free and clear. And that was my first note I got into. Now that you're aware that there's this whole note option, start with your network. Because people will sell their notes. If I'm not interested in keeping a note that I might have, I might sell it to you.
Exactly. And again, just really start talking to people. I mean, that's really what it's about, is starting to talk to people, because you never know who is in that distressed situation and might have a private lender, and you can then go to the private lender. Just, again, talk to people. But I wouldn't focus on a foreclosure list. Me personally, I would not focus on a foreclosure list and try and contact the borrower to get to the bank. Because again, their immediate thought is going to be, you're trying to steal my house. That's what their immediate thought's going to be, guaranteed. So I would be careful of that. Yeah. Anyway, if anybody, by the way, Quint, if you don't mind, if anybody is interested, I do teach a class. I teach a class on this. We go through a lot more detail. It's 3 days. It's coming up in July. We are going to have some guest speakers, one of which is a broker for a hedge fund, so he's going to be there as a contact. He's an amazing man. But I do teach a class live and in person. I do limit the seats because I like for it to be intimate. I like to get to know you and get to know me. There's a lot of material that's covered. So how to find notes, how to fund notes, what due diligence to do, and that is in depth, what due diligence to do. We're gonna go through collateral files, we're gonna go through O&E reports, we're gonna go through tapes. So we're gonna look at tapes and all the rest of that stuff. It is coming up in July. If you're interested in that, please go to my website. It's cashflowchick, cashflowchick.com. Under upcoming events, I also have some flyers in the back. And of course, there's a discount for REN members.